Today we're heading to Rowan County, Kentucky to tell the story of one of the bloodiest and least talked about conflicts in Kentucky history. A conflict that left at least 20 men dead, that turned the streets of Morehead into a battlefield, a conflict that became known as the Rowan County War. And I'm not even going to lie, I hadn't heard of this. I mean, we've all heard of the Hatfields and McCoys. That's obviously a famous Kentucky feud, Kentucky-West Virginia feud. Now, this one, solely Kentucky, and I had never heard of it before in my life. Maybe it's because the Hatfields and McCoys was going on at the same time and lasted longer, but far fewer people have ever heard of the Martin and Tolliver feud. But for 3 years in the 1880s, Rowan County descended into violence, corruption, revenge, and political warfare. This wasn't just a family feud. This was an entire county losing control of itself. This is buried in the Bluegrass. And this is the Rowan County War. In Kentucky, some stories never get finished. They linger unanswered, unresolved, and often forgotten. This is Buried in the Bluegrass, a true crime podcast from O'Gurg Media. Each episode will dive into cases from across the Commonwealth, focusing on documented facts and those pesky little unanswered questions. Welcome back to the madness that is O'Gurg Media in general. Now, before we get into the violence, let's talk about the place where all of this happened. Rowan County is located in northeastern Kentucky along the edge of the Appalachia. I don't know why I say the Appalachia. It's on the edge of Appalachia. The county seat is Morehead, a city many Kentuckians actually know because of Morehead State University. The county is also home to Cave Run Lake, beautiful mountain scenery, and portions of the Daniel Boone National Forest. Now, today, Rowan County is relatively quiet and peaceful, but in the 1880s, life looked much different. The county was rural and isolated, travel was difficult, law enforcement resources were limited to say the least. Now, county government carried tremendous influence over everyday life. Politics weren't just politics. Politics determined who held power, who controlled the courts, who controlled the sheriff's office, who controlled tax collections, and who controlled arrests. And in a county where family loyalty often came before loyalty to the government, those positions definitely mattered. As the 1880s progressed, political rivalries became increasingly personal. Personal rivalries became dangerous, and eventually those rivalries exploded into open warfare. To understand how that happened, we need to go back to the summer of 1884. August 1884, in fact. Election Day in Morehead, which is a wild coincidence because in 1882, just 2 years prior, the Hatfields and McCoys had a very violent election day. But according to all accounts, the atmosphere was already tense. The politics in Rowan County had become deeply divided. Supporters of different candidates all gathered in town. Arguments broke out. Everybody was drinking. The alcohol was flowing freely. As the day progressed and the more the alcohol flowed, tempers began to flare. Then gunfire erupted. When the shooting stopped, Solomon Bradley was dead. Several others were wounded. Among them was John Martin. What began as a political dispute has suddenly become something much larger. The killing hardened divisions throughout Rowan County. People began choosing sides. The Martins on one side, the Tollivers on the other. But this wasn't simply about family names. It was about power, who controlled Rowan County, who controlled the courthouse, and who controlled law enforcement, and basically who would survive. The violence didn't stop after Election Day. Instead, it actually intensified. Later the same year, John Martin shot and killed Floyd Tolliver in Morehead. Authorities arrested Martin and transported him to Winchester for protection. Given the tension in Rowan County, officials feared retaliation, but what happened next shocked everyone, even people accustomed to violence. Someone produced what appeared to be a legal order. Martin was removed from jail, placed aboard a train, and transported back toward Rowan County. Near Farmers, Kentucky, armed men boarded that train. Martin was shot multiple times, and he later died from his wounds. The murder sent shockwaves throughout the region. Many viewed it as an assassination disguised as legal procedure. Any remaining trust between the factions disappeared immediately. Now, both sides had buried their dead, both sides wanted revenge, and neither side intended to back down. As the conflict continued, one man emerged as the central figure in the feud, Craig Tolliver. Supporters viewed him as a strong leader protecting his allies, and of course critics viewed him as a violent political boss operating above the law. Now, regardless of which version is the truth, there is little doubt that Craig Tolliver became one of the most powerful men in Rowan County. The Tolliver faction gained influence over the local government, therefore witnesses became afraid to testify, prosecutions became difficult, opponents feared retaliations, the rule of the law began to weaken. Violence became increasingly common, shootings, ambushes, threats, retaliation. At one point, the Martin family home was attacked and burned. Several men connected to the feud were killed, others were wounded. The county seemed trapped in an endless cycle of violence. As the feud dragged on, many residents they were just trying to survive. All the businesses were suffering. Families lived in fear. People avoided speaking openly about politics. Sounds like today, huh? The danger became so serious that outside observers began describing Rowan County as nearly lawless. Deputies were targeted. Attorneys were threatened. Political opponents feared for their lives. Some residents reportedly carried weapons almost everywhere they went. The conflict had evolved far beyond its original cause. What started as an election dispute was now a struggle for control, and there seemed to be no end in sight. In 1887, the conflict reached another turning point. Two brothers connected with the anti-Tolliver faction, John B. Logan and William H. Logan, were killed. Their deaths outraged relatives and supporters. One family member in particular was determined to act. Boone Logan. Believing local authorities could not restore order, Boone Logan sought assistance from state officials. He traveled to Frankfort, which in that day and age was not a small task. He pushed for intervention. He wanted the violence to be stopped. But help was limited. Frustrated and determined, Logan began organizing his own response. He gathered supporters, he armed them, and he prepared to confront the Tolliver faction directly. A final showdown was approaching. On June 22nd, 1887, everything came to a head. Boone Logan and his supporters entered Morehead. Officially, they intended to serve warrants and make arrests, but everyone understood the situation was far more complicated than that. Gunfire immediately erupted. The battle spread throughout the town. Buildings became defensive positions. Men exchanged shots from cover. Residents watched as their community was turned into a war zone. The fighting centered around locations associated with the Tolliver faction. One of the most important was the Central Hotel. As the battle intensified, the building actually caught fire. The final moments of the feud unfolded amid smoke, gunfire, and chaos. Several members of the Tolliver faction were killed. Among them was Craig Tolliver himself. When the shooting finally ended, so had the Rowan County War. The feud had lasted nearly 3 whole years. At least 20 men were dead. Many others were wounded. Families had been torn apart. The reputation of Rowan County had been permanently altered. The courts eventually addressed some aspects of the violence. Several participants faced legal proceedings. Many were acquitted. Others were never punished. As often happens in violent conflicts, justice depended largely on which side survived. Morehead slowly rebuilt, businesses reopened, life returned to normal. But memories of the war remained. For years afterward, Rowan County carried the nickname Bloody Rowan. The scars left behind would not disappear quickly. The Rowan County War is often described as a feud, and while family loyalty certainly played a role, that description does not tell the whole story. This is also a story about political power, about weak institutions, about corruption, about revenge, and about what can happen when people stop believing the law can solve their problems. For 3 years, Rowan County became one of the most violent places in Kentucky. Neighbors chose sides, families buried their dead, and an entire community paid the price. Today, most Kentuckians have never heard of the Rowan County War, but it's still a story that remains one of the most remarkable chapters in our state's history. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I'm Greg Sexton, and until next time, keep asking questions, because sometimes the truth isn't buried very deep. It's buried right here in the Bluegrass. You can find me on Facebook under Greg Sexton, Ogurg Media, TikTok, Ogurg Media. The email, if you need to send me a nasty email for that matter, it's ogurgmedia@gmail.com. Listen to our other podcasts, WTF Lex, My Bipolar Brain, and our latest to be coming out, Kentucky Conspiracy Files. That one's in the progress, and the first season is going to be Drew Thornton, the Bluegrass Conspiracy, and it's going to be a doozy. And once again, thank you for listening, and have a great day.